Hey, quick update. This week on the podcast, I've got a really awesome interview with writing coach Dawn Josephson. I think you're going to get so much out of this conversation, but I wanted to let you know on the front end, I actually have a little bit of a unique scenario with this one. Something happened with the audio in this file. It's good for the most part, but the first couple minutes, you can't hear Dawn's mic. So I'm going to do something I've never done before. Instead of asking her to record an entire new interview, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to voice over her answers for the first probably about a minute and a half. And then I will fade out and I'll just continue with my side of the interview only. So sorry about that technical challenge, but I thought this would be the best way to still get the interview out to you because I think it was a really good one. So hope you enjoy. And again, apologize for that inconvenience. Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. My guest today is Dawn Josephson. Dawn, how are you? I'm great tonight. How are you? I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. I'm excited to have you. One of the things that I always love to do on this show is I love to encourage my guests to do their own introductions. And so if you don't mind, I would love for you to just take a minute and tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do. Yeah, my name is Dawn Josephson. I'm known as the Master Writing Coach. So I am thereby a writing coach. And what I do is I help authors write, polish, motivate, just basically get their book done, kind of shepherd their book, help them with accountability, help them with everything from idea to finished product. But the goal is really just to help people get a book written, get their book written, the book that's been lying dormant inside of them for so long. That's awesome. How long have you been doing the writing coaching? Let's see. Well, the coaching part I started probably around 2006. So that's a while. Okay. It's a couple years. Yeah. Almost 20 years.
My head, 10 years ago is still 1990. So
that's amazing. And before that, I'm guessing maybe you had a background as a writer yourself. Talk a little bit about your journey and what got you to where you are now.
Yeah. So I actually started in my own business back in 1998. Back in the 1900s. Prior to that, I worked in the publishing world. I worked for magazine publishers and book publishers. Around 1998, I had the courage to finally go out on my own, offering freelance book editing services and freelance writing services. And that evolved into ghostwriting. So I ended up ghostwriting for people. I ghostwrote about 30 books, 5,000 magazine articles, books published by all sorts of publishers, magazine articles in every newsstand publication you could imagine, but they were all ghostwritten. So I did the work. I didn't get the credit, but I got paid. So I was happy.
There you go.
I could pay my bills.
Yeah.
During that journey, I actually started a publishing company of my own called Cameo Publications, and we focused on books for professional speakers. Around 2006 is when I sold that business and kind of went back to my roots a little bit, where it's just me, no more business, no more employees, just me, and went into the coaching world. I've seen every angle of publishing and writing you could possibly see, from newsstand publications to the book world. Done A through Z in both of those worlds. So coaching just made the most sense to take everything that I've learned and done and just help other people get through their journeys. That's amazing. So yeah, it sounds like you have been involved in kind of the writing world for quite a while. Talk a little bit about the transition. So I think you said 98 when you were working the full-time job and then you made the jump to kind of start doing your own thing. Talk about specifically what led to that and maybe walk us through kind of your mindset and fears that you had to deal with or challenges you had to overcome. And was there maybe a catalyst moment where you said, nope,
I'm doing it. I'm all in. Like, talk a little bit about that.
That's a that's a great story. So before I went out on my own, like around 96, 97, I was miserable. I mean, I had a good job. I learned I'm not a good employee. Okay. I'm not employable. And so I was miserable, and I knew I wanted to do something on my own for myself, but I had no idea what. And so what I would do every day at lunch, instead of taking my lunch, I would go for a walk. And I would walk my entire lunch hour. And while I walked, I would envision in my head like what my ideal life would be. And I didn't know I was doing something that I should be doing. I didn't know that this was like a thing in the motivational world of envisioning your future. I was just desperate. And so I was envisioning myself sitting in my spare bedroom typing. I didn't know what I was typing, but I was doing something writing related at home. I had no clue what it was. I just kept this vision in my head going and going and going. And then one day, while I was at work, we had a meeting with me and my boss, and this local book publisher came in, and they wanted to see if our magazine would review some of their books. And as we were wrapping up the conversation, the publisher says to me, by the way, do you know anyone who would be interested in doing like some freelance book editing for us? Like work from home. Like we don't want anyone in the office. And I'm sitting there and my boss is right next to me. And inside I'm like, but I can't say anything because, my boss is right there. So I said, no, I'm not sure. So why don't you give me your card? And if I know anybody, I'll pass on the info. And I got home from work that night and I'm looking at the card and I was like, do I call? Do I do it? Like, should I do it? And I'm holding the card, and it took me like a good 30, 40 minutes to work up the courage to call them and say, hey, it's me from the meeting earlier. And, you asked if someone would do freelance editing. Well, I'd like to do that. And that is what kickstarted the journey. So I had this vision. I didn't know what it was. And then they say that when the student's ready, the teacher appears, or when you're ready, the opportunity appears. And then this opportunity appeared. And I was thinking for a little bit, like, I shouldn't do this. I should throw this card away. Like, who am I to call them when I've got a job? And I said, no, what's the worst that could happen? They tell me no, right? So I gave it a go, and that's what started the whole thing.
You gave it a go, you made the call, and then that opened more doors, led to more opportunities. You're doing the freelance thing, and then eventually, a few years later, about 8 years later, you end up that's when you start doing the writing coaching, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So 1998 is when I left on my own. By 2000, I had so many clients that were professional speakers because I was doing ghostwriting, and they needed a way to publish their books. They didn't want to go traditional publishing. At that time, self-publishing was, this was 2000. Self-publishing wasn't very sophisticated. And I knew there had to be a way to help them. I made this hybrid. I was one of the first hybrid type publishers where they kept all the rights, they got all the money, it was a fee for service, and they got for professional quality, and their books got in Barnes & Noble and all these other places. They got full distribution. So it was a hybrid of traditional publishing and self-publishing. And did that then from 2000 to 2006. And then 2006, I ended up selling the business because I had my first child and I was completely overwhelmed. That's exactly what prompted me to sell the business, sold the business, and started the writing coaching.
That's amazing. Yeah, children can be a little bit overwhelming. Yeah, I'm a dad, so I know all about how that works. That's so cool. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about being a writing coach. What if you could, and maybe this is a hard question, but what is your favorite part about working with authors in the role that you have?
My favorite part is in the beginning, they are so confused and they don't know where to begin. They don't know even, like, if it's a nonfiction author, what their book should be about, or if it's fiction, where their book should even go. I mean, they have so much confusion, and We go through a few sessions to lay the foundation of their book. And there's always this moment where you could see like the light bulb go off in their head. They have this like aha moment and everything becomes crystal clear all of a sudden of, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? Of course, that's what I should be doing. When you actually see it on their face. It's amazing. And so those moments I think are pretty cool. And of course, the moment when we have a Zoom or something and they show me their book, like they got the first copy. That's too.
And is it typical for you to be working with someone from like all the way back from the idea all the way to holding the published printed copy? Like, is that typical, or do people engage you at various spots? Like, what's the right time for somebody to talk with a writing coach?
Well, the right time, it's going to be different for everyone, obviously, but typically, the warning signs that you probably need some help. You're feeling lost. You've lost motivation. Like maybe you still want to do it, kind of, and you're not lost in the words or the story. You just have lost the motivation to keep going. Or you're at like a sticking point where you have the idea, you're not sure, do I do A or B? And it's just, you just can't decide what should be next because you can't do everything in one book. No one can, that's not a good approach for anything. So usually it's when you're really stuck. And you'll know when you're stuck. And I do have people who come to me with literally an idea written on a napkin. They had this brainstorm idea over dinner one night and they wrote their idea on the back of a napkin at a restaurant. And I have people come to me at that stage, and sometimes we do. Yeah, we take that idea and we see it all the way through to publication. Other times people, like I said, they just get to the sticking point and they're not sure how to move forward. And so they engage kind of midway. And then there's some who just need that boost at the beginning. They're not sure if they should do this, and yeah, they should, but they're not really sure of the approach. And so they just need help identifying like who's my audience and what should the purpose be, and getting those initial foundational things figured out. And so that could just give them kind of like a little jumping off point that they need.
It's got to be pretty amazing. So I am a big time reader. I love reading stories. I love hearing people's stories. I love, like, big part of why I started this podcast is because I wanted to hear not necessarily about the stories people are writing. I want to hear like your story as a writer and how, that kind of thing. But it's got to be pretty amazing in the role that you're in to kind of get a front row seat to watching these, not only the books that they're writing unfold, but also their journey as writers kind of taking shape before your eyes. Like I feel like that part of it has got to be so rewarding and so amazing that you get to have access to some of that, those journeys. That's got to be so cool.
It is. And one of the things that I didn't expect to happen, but that has, is because, I'm helping people on this very personal journey. They tell me things that they've never told anybody. I don't want to say I'm a therapist because I'm not, but sometimes I'm like, should I be the one that you're talking to about this? This seems pretty deep. But as a result, this friendship develops. I have clients that have been with me since the late 90s, early 2000s, and we're on their third, fourth, whatever book. I'm still working with them. It's kind of funny where I feel like no matter where I want to go in the world, because I have clients internationally as well, no matter where I want to go in the world, I have a friend. I have someone to call. And I even have some clients where they hear, if we're just casually talking, like, oh, you're going to be in my city? You're not staying at a hotel. You're staying at my house. And, I really want to stay at a hotel. I appreciate the offer, but I really want to, we meet up for dinner or whatever. So I have a friend everywhere I go, which is kind of cool.
That's amazing. So I imagine doing this as long as you've been doing it, I imagine you've gotten pretty familiar with some of the common patterns and pitfalls that authors run into. I'm curious if there are a couple of like examples that you see all the time where, you mentioned when someone gets stuck is the right time to engage somebody like you. So two-part question. First is if there are any specific areas or things where you see lots of people get stuck here. What are those, and maybe some advice on how to overcome them? And then also, I'm really curious into like a percentage breakdown of how many of those ruts that people get into are technical, craft related, how much of them are more like mindset and, that kind of psychological side of it. So I'm interested in that angle. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those things.
Yeah, I'd like to start with the second question, because I can say without a doubt that 100% of the issues are mindset related.
Wow.
100%. Yeah. Technical stuff is easy. And I even tell people when we're working together, I don't care if you write bad. I mean, I don't care if your thing is full of run-ons. I don't care if you misplace all your verb tenses. And I don't care about any of that, because the technical stuff, that's easy. What the hard part is getting the stuff out of here. The hard part is overcoming this internal resistance that we all have to new things, to doing new projects. I mean, whether you're writing a book or doing artwork or going gardening, I mean, we all have this resistance to doing something new because it's new, it's hard, I've never done it, and what if I'm bad at it? And, well, you probably will be bad at first. We're all bad at first at new stuff. So it's 100% mindset. And the common things that I see people having issues with is feeling that who's going to listen to me? Like, why would anyone read what I have to write? A lot of it is fears or maybe negative programming they've had from when they were kids. It's amazing how many things that I talk about with clients, and they open up and say, well, I don't know. I just can't do this because my life is too busy and I don't have time for this. And no one wants my stuff anyway. I mean, what's the point? Who's even going to read that? And, I'm like, we start digging back. It's like, and we realize that, when they were growing up, maybe they had this teacher who told them they can't write, and then they've internalized this whole thing that they're not good enough, and maybe they wrote something then again when they were in high school or college, and they got a bad grade, and this whole thing keeps coming back with, I can't do this, I can't do this. So, mindset, totally mindset. And when people feel like they have permission to just have the stuff out there, which is why I stress so hard. I don't care if your sentences are horrible. I don't care if, you forget to use punctuation on 30 pages. I don't care, because that is not important. And that's what they focus on. They think, oh, my sentences aren't perfect and I haven't said this profoundly. And it's just about once they free themselves from those constraints and just let the stuff flow, like stream of consciousness, just let it come out. They start finding their voice. They start finding their groove. And things the story comes, or if it's a nonfiction, the how-to comes, the advice comes, everything starts coming. Once they take the pressure off about it's got to be perfect. If it doesn't come out perfect the first time, then it's not good enough. Yeah. I just want to say it's just a bunch of garbage. And it's okay to write junk. I write junk every day. It's okay. You just got to start getting stuff out. And once you do, and you let that watershed moment happen, there's no stopping you then. You just got to get to that point.
Yeah. That's crazy to hear. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear you say that 100% of it is mindset, because to me, that was the biggest block for me for a long time. So I don't know how much you know about my story, but I've wanted to write for a long time, and I just never did. I kind of resolved that, like, well, that's not the path that I ended up doing. I'm working for a big company. I've got a family. I can, who can just write, or certainly I know people do it, but like I can't do it. And once you get to that point where you realize, no, you can and you should, you're right. Once you start getting it out there, once you start kind of just getting in the habit really of doing it, then you start to see themes and stories and skills develop that you didn't even know you had. I think it's really interesting. I don't know where I heard this. I wish I could give credit. It was a podcast or something I was listening to recently, and it talked about how we are naturally creators, like from an early age. Like if you walk into, this was the illustration, if you walk into a kindergarten classroom and ask, 15, 20, 30 kids, how many of you are artists? Raise your hand if you're an artist. You're going to get 15, 20, 30 hands. Right? Everybody's an artist, right? But if you walk into a room full of adults and ask how many artists do we have here, you might get 1, 2, maybe 3 hands. But like, what happened? Life has kind of beaten that out of us, or convinced us that we don't have the right to create art or to write or to do things. And that is one of the main reasons I started this show. Is I want to help people rediscover that, because I think there's so much creativity that's yet to be expressed. There's so many great stories that are yet to be written, and people are just, people's dreams are just dying because they're just sitting there not doing anything with it. And I'm like, start doing something, please. The world needs what you have to offer. So it's sad to think that happens, but it's also encouraging to know that, like, in your line of work, you get to see people come back and have that transition happen where the light bulb does come on. And, I don't know, who knows how many great books that you've kind of seen through the process that maybe would have never happened if not for you kind of stepping in and offering that encouragement, right?
Oh, many. It's funny. So many people, when I first meet them, one of the things I hear a lot is, they'll introduce themselves and they'll talk about what their book is potentially about. And then they'll say at some point, now, mind you, I'm not a writer.
Come on.
That always comes out. And I used to do a lot of speaking presentations to like writers groups and publishing conferences. And one of the things I would do to open my speeches was just ask, how many of you here today, raise your hand if you consider yourself a writer? And maybe like 2 or 3 hands would pop up. And I was like, okay, leave your hand up. And I want other people to join in. How many of you on a regular basis write a report for work? A few more hands pop up. How many of you write sales copy? A few more hands. How about, an email, a social media post?
Yeah.
And, and I have a whole list of things that I go through. But by the time we get to emails and social media posts, everyone's hand is up. I was like, okay, here's the point, is that we're all writers. Every day you're writing. You are a writer. We all do it. So What makes one writer better than another? Nothing. You all have something to say. We all have a unique voice, a unique story. No one's story is better than another. It's like a blue crayon's no better than a green crayon. They're just different color crayons. It's the same thing. You're different stories.
Yeah, for sure. And once you get over that hurdle of that, break that soundtrack. I don't know if you've read the book Soundtracks by John Acuff. It's amazing. You should. It's all about like these repetitive thoughts that people have that we play on repeat. And his whole deal is like, take those broken soundtracks and retire those, replace them with new and better ones, and just repeat those. And so once you get to the point where you stop saying, I'm not a writer, and realize that, oh, actually I am, and start telling yourself that, like, it's amazing how much your whole perspective can change when you do that. But so many people are just walking around listening to these broken soundtracks on repeat to the point where they become second nature. And so that's why I'm super excited about the work that you do to help people break out of that, because it's so important. Okay, so speaking of breaking out of things, one of the things that I think is most important, if I'm thinking about like the list of ingredients that make somebody great at doing something like writing a book, I think encouragement is one of the key ingredients that keeps people, not only gets people started, but also keeps them going when it gets tough, because it's going to get tough, right? It's not always, in the flow state and everything, Right. I'm curious, from your perspective, is there a moment or a word that someone has shared with you in your journey where you would look back and say, that was one of the most encouraging things anyone's ever said to me. I'm curious, do you have an example of something you would share?
I wish I had something so profound to say right now, because that would be awesome. But I think like a lot of creatives, because I'm in the same camp. I'm a creative too. And yes, I've had to overcome my own mental things of, oh, I can't do that. I mean, the story I first told you, I stared at that business card for like a good 30, 40 minutes before I had the guts to actually dial the phone and call these people. I think so many of us creative types, we do hear little bits of encouraging things all the time, but they do get overshadowed by the negative. And so what we all really need to do, so the one thing that I've heard from someone long ago that I repeat to myself all the time, and maybe this is the big, profound, encouraging thing, and I tell it to my clients. So it's just like, it's something second nature that I say now, is that I always tell people, I tell myself, yes, this is hard. Writing is hard, but I can do hard things. Or when I talk to my clients, yes, it is hard, but you can do hard things. You've done them in the past. And pointing out then, what are some of the hard things you've done? Maybe you've played the piano really well, or you speak 3 languages, these are all hard things. And you do them. You can do hard things. Writing, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hard.
For sure. Yeah. And the examples you gave of playing an instrument or, learning a language, you don't just snap your fingers and be proficient at those things. You practice and you learn and you grow, and it takes years. I had a guy, one of the guests I had on this show, a friend of mine who's a classical guitarist, one of the most talented, musicians that I've ever known. And he's been doing it his whole life, basically. And he's super good at it. But it wasn't like he just walked in one day and picked up a guitar and started doing it, right? Like, it's practice, it's reps. So so we think, and I think, as I consider this, I think social media has influenced a lot of this. Like, we see everybody else's highlight reel and we think, well, that person they probably just turned on their camera and now they've got 1 million followers. Like, why do I only have 200 followers? Well, you don't know their story. You don't know what they had to do to get there, right? Or how long they've been at it. So I think writing is very much the same way. Like, you're not going to be Stephen King the first time you start typing on your keyboard, right? Yeah.
I remember when I first started, and probably a lot of other people hear this too, when you first start something new, like, I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to sit home and paint all day, whatever. People tell you, that's crazy. You're crazy. You're going to do that? Like, why would you do that? That's crazy. And then you do it. And I had this happen to me at first. Everyone told me I was crazy. You're going to leave your job and freelance? What? That's nuts. You're crazy. And then about a year later, when I was doing pretty well, that suddenly everything changed. And no longer was I crazy. Now it was, I'm so lucky you get to work from home and be your own boss. So first you're crazy, then you're lucky.
Yeah.
And it's that, but there's a whole spectrum of stuff that happened in the middle. So it's kind of like, the 10-year overnight success story that we always hear about. Yeah.
That's all it is. There's no overnight success, right? We think that's what we think it is, but it's never. Okay, Dawn. So a question for you. So there's a lot of authors or, aspiring authors, budding authors who listen to this show. And some of them are probably ready to, go to your website and have a call with you right now. Others of them might be thinking, I don't know if I can make the investment yet. But so for those people, are there any practical tips or resources that you would point them to? Maybe there's somebody who's just starting out and is struggling. Maybe it's a confidence thing, or maybe they just, they've got so many options, they're not sure what to do next. Are there any, and I'm thinking like books, podcasts, or even just pieces of advice that you would offer to somebody who's in that situation?
Yeah, I would say if you're just starting out and really struggling, the number one thing you can do, and it's going to feel counterintuitive, but number one thing is just to write anything. Like, I don't write garbage. Do it. Write garbage. Just let something come out of your brain. And then you don't have to show it to anybody. I'm not saying you're going to publish it or you're going to show it to your spouse or your mom or your sister or whatever. You can throw it in the garbage. That's fine. But just put something down. And the point is to get in the practice of writing something.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, it's kind of like priming the pump. The old days you had to prime that pump to get the water flowing. It's the same thing. So just write something. And so this does two things. It gets you in the habit, but it also is the first baby step to overcoming that resistance to writing that I was talking about earlier, that, we have a new project to do, something new, and we just have this internal force that is like, no, that's scary. That's not doing what we've always done. And so baby steps to get over that. Because then what happens is that writing just the stuff that you throw away, eventually you're not going to throw it away. And I had a college professor in writing, one of the first, she walked into class, this very scary lady. She would look so mean, and she had us write something, and then she collected our little essays, and she took the whole pile, and she threw them all in the garbage. And then she went ahead with the rest of the lecture. And I was like, phew, good, because that was bad. And then she did it again the next time we met. We had to write something. We all wrote furiously. She collected it all, threw it in the garbage. That's weird. And this kept happening. And then finally, after a couple weeks, someone, not me, unfortunately, but someone said, excuse me, why are you throwing them out? And she said, oh, what's your name? Okay. And she dug that person's out and said, okay, you're ready for me to read yours.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. And eventually we all just came to the point. We said, yeah, take mine out of the garbage too, please.
That's great.
It's getting through those baby steps of feeling, that you can do this. So
yeah.
one piece of garbage writing at a time, throw it out. If you're going to get to the point, you're going to start writing. It's going to become a habit. You're going to work that muscle, and you're not going to want to throw it out. You're going to want to keep going because you realize, hey, it might not be great, but it's pretty good. And so build from that and take those baby steps.
That's great. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you think about before you start, getting from there to seeing your book on the shelf in Barnes and Noble seems like how do you ever get there? And so you never take that first step. But once you do, then you take another step, and then you take another step, and eventually all those steps are going to take you somewhere. So I think that's so good. And I think, unfortunately, lots of people never do take that first step, but that's how anybody who's ever finished a book, that's how they do it. They start off and they keep going and they keep going and they struggle and they persevere, and they probably have those dark nights of the soul where they think, oh, I can't write at all. This is terrible. But then they keep doing it. And then eventually there's the book. There's the next book, and there's the next book.
Yeah, we all have those moments of self-doubt.
Yeah.
Even the professionals, even the famous people and the people who are, supposed to be, the gods of writing here, they have those moments too. No one's immune. So we're a lot more alike than not alike than we realize.
That's right. Yeah, that's great. Well, Dawn, I have just a couple of questions left. Hopefully these are easy ones. But the first one, I've just recently added this to the questions that I'm asking people who come on this show, because I just selfishly just love hearing the answers. What's your favorite book that you've ever read, and what made it so great?
There's a book I've read twice. I read it once several years ago, and then just recently I had a client say they ran across it, and did you ever read it? And I was like, yeah, but it's been a while. So I reread it recently, and it's called The War of Art.
Okay. Stephen Pressfield?
Yeah. And it is. He really talks about overcoming that resistance that we all have to doing new things, and he really breaks it down well. And it's one of those books that really it's a fast read. It's a quick, easy read. So it's not like one of those heavy, like, oh my gosh, I got to get through 500 pages here. It's a nice, quick. It goes at a good pace. And it's one of those books that really makes you think about the things that you do and why you're doing it. And I think it's a great book for anyone that's in an art-related thing. Writing, obviously, is an art. In an art-related thing, to help them take that step that they've been avoiding for so long. So pinpoint why you've been avoiding it, and then take the step. Whatever you fear the most, that's what you should be doing.
That's great.
That book. I mean, that's if you ever wonder, what should I be doing with my life? What should I be doing with my time every day? Whatever scares you, that's what you should be doing. That's a good indication.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Okay. Next question is a true or false. True or false? The book is always better than the movie.
I would say true.
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
Okay. All right. Some people have pushed back. I agree with you. Some people have pushed back with me and offered a couple of examples of where that's not the case. But in general,
book versions, your imagination is so much better than Hollywood. I can make such a better picture in my head than what anyone in Hollywood can.
And that's always going to be true. No matter how much money they invest, no matter how far advanced we get with AI and all the other stuff that's out there, like, our minds are so incredible. And you're right. I think that's always going to be the case. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, Dawn, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on. It has been great talking with you. Last question, and this one is an easy one. How do people get in touch with you? If someone's ready to engage you as a writing coach or just want to follow along with the work that you're doing, give me your website, social media, all the stuff. Give me all the links.
Yeah, my website is just my name, dawnjosephson.com. Very simple. Facebook is dawnjosephson.com. Everything's under my name, except for Instagram. That's the only one that's different. And that is Writing Coach Dawn.
Got it.
So I tried to keep it as simple as possible.
Simple is best. I love it. It's very easy. Thank you so much. I will include all those links in the show notes. This has been really great. And thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.